Hello, and welcome back to day 6 of 100 Days of Clarity. Today, we're going to finish off learning about the primitive data types that we learned about the past couple days. And so we've talked about now Booleans, we talked about principles, and we talked about numbers and how they take the form of either unsigned integers if they're only positive, or signed integers if we need negative numbers. Today, we're going to cover the last of these most basic data types. And it's also another data type that is universal across all languages. Just like numbers and Booleans, if you dealt with any other programming language, you've undoubtedly dealt with strings. And so today, we're going to review strings in detail. And just like how numbers can either be defined in two different ways, meaning unsigned or signed, strings can also be defined two different ways, either with UTF-8 standard or with an ASCII standard. Most of the time, people will use the ASCII standard in Clarity, but they both work regardless. Much like the difference between signed and unsigned, the difference between ASCII and UTF-8 is UTF-8 strings have a U in front of it, just like unsigned integers. So, with that said, let's go ahead and just open up our Clarity file, open up our terminal, and start off where we left off. So if we have our Clarity Basics 1 file open, we can go ahead, press enter, comment day 6, and let's just say strings. Okay. And as a tradition, whenever you're learning a new programming language, the most common thing to do is to write a hello world function. And so we're going to work our way up through that. Let's first start by just writing a define read only, which again, hopefully this is now becoming secondhand nature. Call it say hello, tab to go into the body, enter, and then obviously indent twice. Okay. So now we're here. All we're going to do is just type in string, in quotations, hello, and save. And of course, we can now spin up our local blockchain using Clarinet, and of course, assuming we're in the right directory. And okay, we can just press up arrow. We're not going to write out contract calls manually this time, and just run say hello. Cool. And if we run that, we can see that our terminal is indeed returning a string of hello. But that's not too exciting. We want hello world. And if we wanted to do this a simple way, we could just, write into the string directly hello world. But instead of doing that, what we're going to do is take this opportunity to introduce one of the most common functions used with strings. And it's actually the equivalent of adding in numbers. Whenever you want to add two strings together, instead of saying adding, you just say concatenate. And in Clarity, instead of using the add function, you use a function called concat, C-O-N-C-A-T. Works the exact same way, open parentheses, concat, string 1, string 2, close parentheses. And so let's go ahead and write a function that now says hello world, but instead of making it in one string, we're going to concat two different strings. First string hello, second string world. Okay, so open parentheses. As you can see, the preview for concat is popping up. Concat. And then hello, and then second word world. And now, I'm not sure if you're going to see quite yet, but there's going to be a bug that happens here. It's going to run, but it's not going to be the result we expect. So let's go back to the contract, Control C twice, again, run everything again, up arrow, and instead of running say hello, run say hello world. And as you can see, we got hello world, but not what we were looking for. We had it all bunched together in one string, which makes sense. If you think about it, Clarity doesn't really know that there should be or that we wanted to put a space there. It's just smashing together these two strings. So if we want to have a manual space there, we can just add it ourselves. So we can go ahead and add that space, and now that should fix it. So go ahead and run the function again, and we see we do indeed get hello world. And of course, much like how in the numbers example at the end, especially in advanced operators, we showed that you can put functions inside other functions. We're going to go ahead and take this example a little bit further, and instead of saying hello world, we're going to write hello world, comma, a name. And so you can feel free to put in whatever name you want. I'm going to use set Zeus. If you want to use your own, go for it. Let's go ahead and write define read only. Say hello world name. Let's all call it name, so we're at least we have a standard there. And then again, first just do the first you can just copy the exact line we wrote and step above. Concat say hello world. And now let's think about what we want to respond. We want to respond with hello world, comma, a name. We already have hello world here. So let's go ahead and add a comma to the world and add, and just leave it there for now. And so now we know that we want to concat this string of hello world with a name. And so what we can do is leave this result as the first input for a new concat function, and then write in a name for the second input. So we're going to go ahead and on the outside of this, open parentheses, concat, and then jump to the other side of this function, quotation marks, your name or whatever name you want to use, the second one, and again make sure we have a space in the front because we didn't have a space at the end of world, and then we want to close parentheses so that the concat is closed, or the outer concat. And now let's go ahead and press save. And if we go back to the contract and run it again, we expect that we will get hello world, comma, space set Zeus. And if we run say hello world name, we can see that we indeed got say hello world set Zeus. And so now we show that we can put a concat inside another concat function, just like we could do the same. We could do the same with numbers, just like you'll be able to do with any clarity function. And with that, I do want to end it on a little bit of syntax note. As you'll start to see, what I have here on line 61 is starting to get a little bit ugly and not that clean. And I want to talk about a little bit of how I structure functions and how we'll be doing it for the next couple of videos. Though again, I want to give the caveat that this is just a personal preference, and there's certainly other arguments for laying functions out differently. But to me, whenever I see a clarity function that is taking up one line but it's very hard to read, what I do is I'll just open up a function, create space, and indent what the inputs are. So for example, this function that we have here, on line 61, to make it more legible, I want to see, okay, I know I'm concatening, but what are the two inputs here? And so I would do space enter for the first input, enter for the second input, and then closing parentheses here. And you can see the symmetry that I have between how we open the function at the top, how we close it with the lowermost parentheses, and then when we open and close the upper concat. And yeah, so that's going to be something that we look over very, very commonly. You're going to see me rewriting code whenever it gets too hairy in this way. And so I just want to take a couple seconds to review that before we move on. I do want to talk about what we didn't do, and we didn't talk about how to define a string with a fixed length. And again, I just want to put that warning out there, because if you go a little bit too ahead here, you're going to figure out that strings can only sometimes perform functions with strings of exact same length. And so the length of strings is going to matter, and the length of lists and other more complicated data types that we're soon going to visit are going to matter as well. But for now, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. You've now reviewed all the primitive data types in Clarity, so Boolean, principles, numbers, and strings. And with that, we have enough to move on to a little bit more complicated data types, and soon lists and composites, which is something that holds multiple different data types. And with that, thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.